This is a battle cry for the American way of life and a relentless pursuit of truth and justice. It comes from a voice with unmatched experience and unyielding resolve. Join us as we dissect current events and tip the scales in your favor. This is Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
Rudnick with Rally for the Republic, here with another one of our special and unique guests, Gabriel Nadales. Hopefully I've said that correctly. He is the National Director of Our America. Gabriel is a free speech activist and author of a book, Behind the Black Mask, My Time as an Antifa Activist. As a former far-left activist with the anti-fascist movement, Gabriel has spoken to over 100 college campuses to warn students against political extremism, violence, censorship, and critical race theory. He holds a degree in general studies and concentration in social justice essentials from Southern New Hampshire University. He is a ITF black belt and martial artist, a husband and a father, which are probably the most important things in your bio. Gabriel, welcome to Rally for the Republic.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're very excited to hear what you have to say. You are clearly one of the most unique guests we've ever had here. Could you please tell Rally for the Republic's audience, your organization is called Our America. What does Our America do?
Sure. I'm the National Director for Our America, and Our America is a great organization. It seeks to unite Americans, both from the left and the right, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans advocating for Our America. Really, the purpose is to talk to Americans on the ground and talk to them about the issues that they really care about. We are not a political organization, but we definitely are an issue-based organization. We advocate for safer streets and brighter futures, getting the government out of the economy to make sure that we keep inflation in check, as well as we fight to protect people's freedom of speech and freedom and religious freedom rights. This is kind of what we are all about, because we believe that the vast majority of Americans are more united than politicians and the media would like Americans to believe.
So are there specific goals or policies that you people are, I guess you're a grassroots organization working to get people focused on these issues?
Of course, yeah. Yeah. Right now, we're currently very active in both Arizona and Georgia. Those are two states that we found a lot of support. Recently, we had a rally over in Phoenix just a couple of weeks ago. Just what the Department of Justice is trying to do in Phoenix. Let me just tell you a little bit about that. They're trying to force a consent decree under so the police department is basically under the supervision of the Department of Justice. And there's a lot of people out there, people who from both sides of the political aisle, who they want to maintain control of the police department locally. They want to retain local control. So we had about a couple dozen activists show up at the city council and speak in favor or against the city council voting in favor of the consent decree. This is just one of the things that we're doing in Phoenix. Before that, we had an event over in Tucson where we're advocating for more resources for the police department in Tucson, because I mean, this is kind of a tragic story. One of the things that we were talking about then, there was this police officer whose name is escaping me right now, but he crashed and he was killed. But what ended up happening is that the crash wasn't even that bad. The problem was that he was driving a Crown Victoria from the 1990s. Tucson desperately needs to upgrade its vehicles, yet they're not really providing enough resources to get better and newer vehicles. I mean, that vehicle was like 20, 30 years old. And that's a huge problem that Tucson is facing right now. Over in Georgia, we're having a couple of different events, local events with some activists to help some local businesses. I know we're having a fashion show this weekend with a local boutique store that sells clothes for children, to help them out, as well as to talk about the issues of the cost of living and other issues that Georgians are facing. Those are some of the grassroots things that we're doing just right now.
And when you talk about issues like in Arizona with the consent decree, you're saying that the local government is abdicating its responsibilities and just handing over authority to the federal government?
Pretty much. I mean, it's not something that they specifically sought, but the Justice Department, the Department of Justice, they like to do this. They like to go into different departments. They like to get control of the department. It's supposed to be temporary, until they supposedly make efforts to clean up their mess or whatever, Because to be fair to what the Department of Justice was doing, there was quite a few messes that the Phoenix Police Department had to clean up. But this was not something new. This has been going on for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years now. And there's multiple articles that show that the Phoenix Police Department has enacted several different policies to reform its policies and to be able to make sure that it holds people accountable. There's more transparency. A lot of these issues are being addressed already. Nonetheless, the Department of Justice still wants that consent decree. But let me tell you this: there has never been one local police department that has been subjected to a temporary police consent decree that has not been lifted. Every single one of those consent decrees is still in place. It is not a temporary thing, because once the government gets a little bit of power, you almost never get it back.
That's unfortunate. But let's get into some more recent topics. I mean, yesterday, you and I scheduled this interview last week. We didn't know that yesterday was going to happen. Thankfully, neither one of us were involved in knowing that. And, you were an Antifa activist. So I want to get down to understanding Antifa. I'm sure my audience would like to know more about Antifa and what they didn't hear in the news since 2020. Is something like what we saw yesterday the kind of activity and action that Antifa would have talked about or wanted to plan?
The best way to understand Antifa is not as an organization, but as a movement. And then within that movement, you have several different radical left-wing groups. And some of them call themselves Antifa, but a lot of them don't. So you have Rose City Antifa over in Portland. I know that one of their quote-unquote leaders, Lisa Azar, she was just arrested and prosecuted. Actually, she just got convicted a couple of weeks ago now. And she is the first Antifa affiliate, Rose City Antifa affiliate in the state of Oregon to actually be serving time behind bars right now. But not long before that, you actually also had some people over in San Diego, California. The San Diego prosecutors, they broke up an Antifa cell just a couple of months ago, and they sentenced to prison about 5 or 6 different individuals who were involved in some of the activities down there. So there are Antifa groups out there, but the vast majority of them don't call themselves Antifa. Now, as far as like what they would do to plan something like this, a lot of them are definitely much more local. I'm sure that there's people within the Antifa movement who would love to kill the president. Like, there's no doubt in my mind, and I feel like they would. But at the same time, a lot of them know where to draw the line. They always push the boundaries and try to get away with as much as possible. Because let me tell you this, they understand that if any one of them actually attempted to kill the president, whether it be President Trump or Vice President Harris or President Biden or whoever, like a national prominent figure, all of a sudden the Department of Justice and the FBI would have no choice but to come down on every single cell. So right now, a lot of the times, they are treated as a local problem, and state prosecutors are left to deal with them. And unfortunately, there hasn't been enough political will to really go against them. I just mentioned a couple of cases right now in Oregon as well as in San Diego, but it's worthy to note that the prosecutors over in Oregon were not the ones from that oversee Portland. Happened in the county adjacent to Portland. I'm forgetting the name of the county. And they were actually the ones responsible for putting her behind bars. So it becomes a political potato or a hot potato, and like who is going to actually do something about this. But if any one of their members or activists were to actually do something as serious as attempting to assassinate or even succeed in assassinating the president, it would become a federal issue, and that would be the death of the entire movement, at least for the foreseeable future. And I'll give you an example of something that's happened in the past. In the 1990s, you had 2 different radical factions. They were called the ERA and the ALF, the Earth Liberation Front and the Animal Liberation Front. These 2 anarchist groups, and for the most part, anarchists, I should say, they were causing millions of dollars in property damage by going into different factories and just firebombing them. They were firebombing them. They were destroying a lot of machinery. I know that some of the groups would put metal, I don't know what to call them, like trinkets into trees. So that way, when somebody's cutting down the trees with a chainsaw would hit the metal spike, it would actually like bounce off and it could kill like people. Nobody actually died, just to be clear at this point. But it became such a big issue that the federal government actually did something about it in the 1990s. And they prosecuted a lot of these chapters. And basically, that's why by the 2000s, you never even hear anything about the ALF and the ELF, because they were basically down. They were put down, for lack of a better term. So the Antifa groups, which in America really started organizing as Antifa in 2007, they understood from their predecessors that they need to be at the local level and just be able to kind of toe that line and create as much havoc as possible without to disturb elections, local elections, to intimidate people who may support certain candidates without actually being held accountable for their actions.
You know, in some previous interviews you've given, and I think some other statements you've put out, you've said Antifa is dangerous. How dangerous are we talking about?
I mean, if you look at the history of like the anti-fascist movement or just radical left-wing movements, first of all, it is a complete lie that Antifa has never killed anybody. There's multiple examples throughout history. One of the things that gets ignored is right after World War II. If we look at the original Antifa, actually, let me take a step back and talk about the original Antifa. So the original Antifa started sometime in the 1920s, late 1920s, early 1930s, and it was in Germany. Obviously, it was the Anti-Fascist Action or something. It was in German. And they were a political party just like any others. It's important to note that the Russian government, the communist Soviet government, they actually would prop up the German socialist parties and the Antifa parties and to create some havoc over it in Germany, which is just kind of an interesting dynamic there. Nonetheless, they would fight with brown shirts, and they would actually, beat up people, and I believe there was a book by Mark Bray, who's this far left activist, called Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, in which they talked about how some anti-fascists would actually go up into the people's homes and beat them up and tell them, you got to get out of here, or like we're going to come back and kill you and your family. So that's the original Antifa party. Now, after World War II, the Antifa party, for the most part, or not Antifa party, but the Antifa movement basically died out. But there was a retribution killings in Italy from some of the anti-fascist actors there, in which they killed multiple people once the Allies started winning, they were massacres. They were retribution killings. They were not proper in any way. At the time, they did justify them as like getting back at the fascists and all these things, but that's the original Antifa party. Now, to be fair to the modern Antifa movement, there's no direct connection between today's Antifa and that Antifa, because it basically died out. But at the same time, it's just the way that modern neo-Nazis have no connection to the original German neo-Nazi party. There really is no connection today, but they both promote the same ideas from the Germans from in the 1930s and 1920s. And now, when it comes to modern Antifa, it started sometime in the 1980s in America, in the UK. In America, they call themselves Antifa, but in America, they call themselves the Anti-Racist Action. The founder of the Anti-Racist Action is actually this gentleman over from Minnesota. Like, he's still, and I believe he's still alive. He's an activist who is still continuing to promote some of these ideas. The reason
is he by chance a friend of Tim Walz, do you know?
No, I wouldn't be. No, I don't think he would be, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of radical things going on in Minnesota. Some of the more radical chapters or more radical movements within the anarchist movement have come out of Minneapolis. And I mean, it's no surprise why I'm forgetting his name. I am the former vice chair of the Democratic Party. He posted a picture sometime in 2019 with this book I just mentioned, the Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, and he talked about how it should strike fear into the heart of every Trump supporter. I'm paraphrasing. And well, that book talks about how you should commit violence against Trump supporters and against Republicans, So, I mean, there's a lot.
Kind of like how Maxine Waters advocated, get in their face and things like that.
I am not familiar with Maxine Waters' statement. She's she's in California, right? She's
Correct.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with her statement, but I mean, out of Minneapolis, there's a lot of radical movements, anarchist movements that have come out over the last 40 years now, and very radical voices.
Sounds like the FBI would be better served going there and doing some research there than going after parents at school board meetings, right?
Oh, certainly.
Or going after conservative Catholics.
You are listening to Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
So let me ask you, you seem like a really nice, patriotic individual. How did you end up as an Antifa activist?
I've been involved in politics for a very long time. I've been involved in politics for almost 20 years. And the thing that people ask me when I tell them that is they ask, well, how old are you? I'm 30 years old. I've been involved for a very, very long time, 18 years now. And I did not start on the radical fringes. I definitely started off in 2006 when I believe there was a bill pending before the House, or I believe it was passed by the House of Representatives, which would basically make it illegal or make it a criminal offense that with jail time for any person who crosses a border illegally. Now, obviously, crossing the border illegally is it's a crime, but it's often treated as civil penalty. So you just get deported, and then you just don't get allowed to come in. And if you continue to come in, they just keep deporting you. That's basically the gist of it. But this this law would have made it so if you come in repeatedly, you're going to start serving jail time. And myself as an immigrant, I remember that a lot of the people in my community, they were talking about how this was not a good bill for anybody because it wasn't just going after illegal immigrants. It could potentially go after any legal immigrant. And I was 12 years old, and a lot of my teachers were talking about it. A lot of my friends were talking about it. So I started getting involved, started going to rallies, started going to events. From there, I moved on to in 2010, there was a Governor Schwarzenegger. At the time, he wanted to cut the teachers' budget. So I went over with my teachers and the teachers union to go march in support of that. I did a lot of anti-war things as well. And there were these events that you attended being hosted by particular organizations? Yeah, I mean, there certainly were. Some of them were certainly by different organizations, but it was just, I was never a leader like in middle school. Obviously, I was a kid, but I was definitely politically involved. If there was a rally there was a cause that I believed in, I was going to go. If there was an anti-war rally or whatever, like in Los Angeles or whatever, I was going to go. The pink protest, I believe they were called, that was promoted by the teachers union. And and they were local events. I remember they were also trying to cut the music budget, so I would go to the hearings and stand in the back and just show support for some of these causes. But after a while, it made me realize that a lot of the work that I did almost felt like it never really accomplished anything. So I started to get a little bit annoyed with that fact. And now in 2011, there was a neo-Nazi rally, and this is an actual neo-Nazi, the National Socialist Movement. They were going to be attending an event over in Claremont, California. And at the time, I was not part of the Antifa movement, but I had heard about the Antifa movement just from some of the readings that I had. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to show up. So I did. I showed up dressed in black, just like Antifa would. And once there, it didn't take long for an Antifa activist to come up to me and ask me if I wanted to join him and his friends to, oppose the Nazis head on. I was 17 at the time, and that was the first time that I marched with Antifa. And from there, obviously, those were my connections to Antifa, and I did a lot of different events all throughout Southern California. I attended a couple different anarchist book fairs, as well as different actions that we promoted. I was active from 2011 to 2012.
Okay, what changed you?
I've always been a very thoughtful and reflective person. I mean, I kind of have to be if I've been involved since I was 12. And I've always questioned what people were doing and like policies. And I remember that I started to read about the free market and about like capitalism and all these different things in my economics class. And I found these ideas incredibly interesting, but I didn't agree with them because, I was still an anarchist. But I realized that as soon as I started talking to my friends about these ideas, that they didn't want to entertain them. They would call me like a capitalist pig, or they would say that, that's capitalist propaganda. And I was being ostracized just for asking certain questions. And that, when you tell somebody don't think of an elephant, they're going to think of an elephant. So when people told me, don't think about that, don't promote that stuff, well, I'm like, I want to know what's more, like, because you tell somebody not to look, they're going to look. So in my freshman year, I was definitely parting ways with this whole movement. And I started to look for friends who advocated for ideas that just like mine, or just like the libertarian ideas, because I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to really understand what the libertarian and conservative movement was all about. So I ended up starting a libertarian club on college, because all the clubs that were already present, they were all liberal clubs. There was no conservative club. Like, I wanted to talk to people who disagreed with me. So I did. And
I know what that's like. I had the same experience in college.
Yeah. And, I just talked to people. I that's all I did. I would meet people who were libertarian, and I became friends with them. I mean, some of them, they're still my great friends. One of them just had a baby like a couple of months ago. I've known them for over 10 years now. And the way I changed is really not a red pill moment or anything of the sort. It was a natural transition into the person that I am today.
When you look at what's going on in America's college campuses with the anti-Israel protests, is there reason to believe Antifa organizations, Antifa factions are involved in that?
I would not be surprised if they are, because a lot of these organizations, they are all united under a matrix of the oppressors versus the oppressed. And they put themselves as the oppressed who are fighting against the oppressors. And whenever you put this into this, you always look into this. And when you put things into this binary, you are always looking for people who is oppressed and who. If you are a common working person, it's the capitalists. If you are a Palestinian, it's the Israelis. If it's what do they call it? If you're Muslim, it's Jewish people. You're always putting themselves into these kind of like boxes of being the oppressed versus the oppressor, and they find solidarity among them. And this is why you'll see American groups, local chapters that will say Palestinian students for the LGBT, or LGBT for Palestinians. It makes absolutely no sense, considering Palestinian people would they do throw gay people off buildings, and they are some of the worst people on earth when it comes to human rights of people who happen to be gay, or any of that community. But when you look at it through that lens, you realize that Antifa is doing the same thing. They put themselves as in the class of the oppressed, and they fight against anybody who is the oppressor, which is the fascists, the capitalists,
So the people who don't feed the Palestinians, but buy missiles with the same UN aid money, they're not the oppressors.
They're not. They're the oppressed, and they're doing whatever they can to fight against the oppressors, at least as they say it.
Okay. So getting back to the 2024 election, it appears you've been busy writing a bunch of op-eds in some of the media. And I see you've got some out there, and you want to dispel the fact that Kamala Harris is a law and order candidate like she purports to be. Would you care to elaborate on that? Because I recall she's even gone as far as to say she's a cop.
Yeah, like Kamala the cop. Kamala Harris is trying to run on her record as a prosecutor, and she first became a prosecutor sometime in the mid 2000s. But her record it speaks for itself. There was an ad recently that talked about how she was fighting transnational cartels, because she was the prosecutor from a border state. But if you look at her record, I mean, she was supporting sanctuary cities. And one of the problems with sanctuary cities is that it shields illegal immigrants, including those who commit violent crimes, from deportation. In fact, in 2012, I think 13 actually, California did pass a law that allowed a lot of cities to decline to work with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security to deport some of these individuals. In one instance, I know that Kamala Harris stopped the deportation of this guy. What is his name? Ronnie Aguilera, and he had violently attacked a man, and he was arrested, and he was likely going to get convicted because he here illegally, but he. Thanks to Kamala Harris's efforts, he was not deported, and he later murdered a 22-year-old man by cutting his head off, nearly decapitating him a whole with a sword. And I remember that story when it first broke. And obviously, Kamala Harris didn't want to do anything with it, but it was under her jurisdiction as the district attorney of San Francisco at the time. And I mean, if you just look at her record, either she uses her power for political gain, and whether it be supporting sanctuary cities to make sure that she looks good in front of progressives, or enforcing there's another case, the enforcement of Jessica's law. So in California, there's a law that basically imposed stricter penalties for sex offenders, and after their incarceration ends, it basically prevented them from living close to parks or schools or the like. Well, in San Diego, there was a district court ruling that essentially said that those restrictions had to be relaxed because the population density of San Diego was just too much, and it was just impossible to abide by the law. Kamala Harris wrote a private memo as Attorney General of California and basically said that other cities could use that logic to relax restrictions on sex offenders, despite the fact that this ruling only affected San Diego. Not only that, but she wrote this anonymously while continuing to say that she supported strict penalties for sex offenders. And it just goes to show you that she was telling her private donors and her private supporters and her progressive friends, hey, look, like I'm really relaxing all these policies, but to voters, she's trying to act like a tough on crime politician.
So I always tell the listeners here at Rally for the Republic to keep a notepad handy while they're listening to the show. And thanks to you, they're going to be able to fill that notepad. Okay. Because I think they should, I try to make sure that I, along with the guests, give them information to share with friends and family to help make informed decisions at this year's election. So you've mentioned Kamala wrote this memo about Jessica's law. You said she wrote it anonymously. So who exposed her as the author of the memo?
So I think the word memo isn't correct. There's an actual official thing for it there, but it's an opinion. There we go. As Attorney General, she wrote
an Attorney General opinion.
Yeah, there we go. And I believe that I'm forgetting the name of the organization, but there was a multiple different Freedom of Information Acts to say, hey, what is going on? You had to. There was a liberty.
So it came from her office as an official document.
Yeah, an official document. Yes, it did.
Okay. So she would have had to sign off on it no matter what.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So I just wanted to clear that up so people could trust the information you're sharing with them when they go to share with the people who believe that Kamala's a fighter for women and a fighter for children and a fighter for seniors, that she was not so tough on crime.
So here we go. I looked it up real quick. The Criminal Justice Legal Foundation was the one who in 2015 was trying to figure out why it was made confidential. It wasn't private. It was made confidential. And there's an article out there. It's why is Kamala Harris's sex offender advisory confidential? It's an advisory, not an opinion.
I would love it if you would share that link with me after the interview so I could share it with the audience.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. That's one of the best pieces of information I think has been shared on this program. So I appreciate that.
Of course, yeah. And I mean, yeah.
And kind of following up on that, I know one of your other op-eds, I mean, you've written about saying that there's a facade of freedom when it comes to Kamala Harris.
You know, right after President Trump was almost assassinated the first time, Democrats immediately realized that two things. Number one, they were going to be hit hard because if they continue to falsely claim that Trump is a threat to democracy, because obviously there's no direct or legal culpability to anybody who says he's a threat to democracy. It's freedom of speech, but it is irresponsible to continually call somebody Hitler and then expect nobody to do something about it. So they realized that they needed to take that talking point away from Republicans. So they shifted their campaign away from Trump is a Hitler, Trump is a threat to democracy, to we just care about freedom. This is actually very smart, because by allowing them to talk about freedom,
words matter.
Yeah, allowing them to talk about freedom. Well, the vast majority of Americans, as I mentioned with my work at Own America, the vast majority of Americans support freedom. They still believe in the American dream, and they wanted to tap into those demographics. The problem is that their 20-plus year record shows that they're full of BS. And because if you just look at Walz, for example, he would give one of his initial speeches. Some of my friends called it one of the most libertarian speeches, like by a major presidential candidate in modern history. I 100% agree with them. He said, "Mind your business." But then you look at his record, well, people were, he didn't really care if people were trying to mind their business during COVID regulations, because the COVID regulations and lockdowns that Governor Walz put in Minnesota were some of the worst in the country. And he was actively advocating for people to snitch on their neighbors for violating policies. It's well documented. That's just one on
he might have meant when he was saying, mind your business, like, don't look into his military record. Don't look into his policies of putting tampons in the bathroom.
Exactly. And, when it comes to Kamala Harris, I've mentioned it. Like, her 20 years record just shows how much of how false of this freedom it is. Now, one of the things.
Well, she's not going to take our guns away. She told us.
No, 100%. I'm not going to take your, what did she say in the debate? She told President Trump, "Stop it with the lies. No one's taking away your guns." Immediately, she and Waltz own guns.
They
own guns, but yeah.
The guns she took from the buybacks in California.
No, it's funny because immediately you have her on the record saying that she was going to have mandatory gun buybacks. It's insane to me how in the fact
I just told the audience in my prior episode, I read her quote after the Georgia school shooting and how different it was from her statement after President Trump was shot at the second time.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Or at least the second attempt at assassination.
Yeah.
But we're getting close to the end here, and I want to make sure, that we don't miss anything that I wanted to talk to you about here. So, what do you believe? You're somebody who started out as a teenager in politics, which is very admirable. It took me a few years longer than you to get involved, and you went to the far left, as some perceive, and now you're a leader within the conservative movement. So based on that great education and perspective you have, what should Rally for the Republic listeners know that you believe is the greatest threat to our republic?
I wouldn't consider myself a leader of the conservative movement, but I will say that one of the things that I think is one of the most dangerous things to the republic, into democracy, is critical race theory as well as postmodernism. I know it seems a little bit weird, it's a little bit more esoteric, but there's a lot of groups out there, liberal groups out there, that claim that President Trump is a threat to liberal democracy. Like liberal, not in like a liberal, left-wing liberal, but it's like a liberal institution. And when I look at the Democratic Party, I see them promoting postmodern theories into this K-12. That is a direct attack on democracy and on liberalism in the traditional sense, because postmodernism is outwardly very much so a rejection of the liberal culture. That's what's called postmodernism. The modernism they were referring to at the time in the 1960s was liberalism. They're trying to get away from liberalism itself. And now in the 1980s, I'm sorry, keep giving your listeners like history lessons, but postmodernism.
So that's okay, because the Rally for the Republic listeners are some of the most educated in America, and they love learning more.
So postmodernism is the foundation of critical race theory. And as I mentioned, it's a rejection of the constitutional framework. It's a rejection of liberalism. And when you see Kamala Harris promoting the terms like Latinx, especially because right now we're getting close to, it already is Hispanic Heritage Day, and promoting multiculturalism. And, a lot of cultures are wonderful. But we should never promote multiculturalism. We should be promoting pluralism. It always forgets me. Pluralism, the idea that America is actually great, and not all cultures are. Cultures should be respected as long as they are capable of respecting others as well.
What can the Rally for the Republic audience do to help you and your organization, other than to continue reading your brilliant op-eds?
If people want to check us out at Our America, they can go to joinouramerica.org, or they can follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to promote some of the the traditional classic liberal ideas that the vast majority of Americans believe in.
Thank you. Is there any other parting wisdom you wish to give to the Rally for the Republic audience?
Keep fighting, President Trump said it. Fight, fight, fight.
Gabriel Nadales, National Director of Our America, I thank you for joining us here at Rally for the Republic. This has been a very enlightening interview, and I appreciate it. I know the Rally for the Republic audience also appreciates it. So thank you.
Thanks.
And God bless you. Please keep up your good work.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on Rally for the Republic, where we are fighting for America's future. Visit 1776coalition.com. Rally for the Republic podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, and download. Join Bryan Rudnick next time as we continue to fight for the American way of life and challenge the hypocrisy. This is Rally for the Republic.